I would like to thank all of our four panelists once again. Before I go into the individual questions, I would like to use my prerogative to give a common question to all of you first. In 2003, UNESCO ratified an international convention on ICH. And this allowed for the participation not just of governments, but institutions and communities and even individuals. But recently we've seen rapid technological advancements with the fourth industrial revolution and also with COVID-19, these digital divide and the issues with digital literacy. So all of these different digital related issues are making it difficult for certain governments and communities and individuals to participate in ICH safeguarding, despite the 2003 convention. What can individuals and communities and groups do to try to achieve and the goals of the 2003 convention? What can we do despite these different digital challenges? Perhaps each panelist can answer to this question depending on where they're coming from. Maybe you can focus on social enterprises or the role of IT technology or the role of tourism, and etc. If you can do that, that would be very helpful. And as for the order of the responses, why don't we go in order in the agenda? So Mr. George Gachara, can you tell us what you've given us an inspirational presentation on the role of the HEVA Fund. What can the HEVA Fund or various other funds like yourself play in helping individuals and groups and communities to play a more active role in the safeguarding of ICH under the 2003 convention?
Thank you. Thank you for this question. And thank you for summarizing at least the points that you would like me to highlight. In my experience, is that the culture and creative industries, especially in my region in the world, is gradually getting recognition. And as this recognition starts to happen, it is important that everyone plays their role. Again, communities have always played their role. It's the communities that create the intellectual property that we call music, or the experiences, or the sites. The communities already have made their investment. It's the third parties. These are the government, local governments, development institutions, and definitely financiers and intermediaries like us who come much later. So if you ask me what are the critical roles that should be played at the very beginning, I would imagine that the protection and conservation support directly to communities should be at the forefront, because this safeguards the expression. And we've known traditionally that intermediaries like to, they have an impact in terms of their contribution. So it is important that intermediaries, whether they're governments, development sector, or private sector, to have certain values, that first they do not divest the IP from the owners. Second, they have ethical engagements. Third, that they actually respect the expression of the cultural producers, and that is some of the values that we have. If you look at finances, particularly finance comes with arrogance, and it comes with ego, and it comes with ambition. These are very interesting values to bring to cultural communities. Every time I meet with cultural communities, they often say that we hope that you won't commercialize or make our work lose its soul, or make us business people. And so as finance institutions, it's important to realize that the values of the communities come first. And so for us as HIVA, we've always looked at financial innovation as our key contribution, that our financing must align with the business cycles, with the life cycles, and with the ambitions of the cultural producers. So that would be my initial contribution, especially from the perspective of those that finance. The second thing that is important is whatever finance that is brought in should also look at social value. Socioeconomics is critical to culture and creative production. So social equity should not be disrupted in favor of privatization. So models like community equity, cooperative, shared economy, these are interesting places to start to look at and experiment. And as HIVA, we are at the forefront of creating hybrid models, and we've already deployed several hybrid models that allow that social value is not disrupted. And finally, the term and the length of investment is critical to seeing the growth of this emerging new medium. We've seen in our environment that there's a lot of experimentation with digital technologies. There's a lot of experimentation with new forms of engaging media. And if we bring short-term financing or only project-based financing, we realize that we do not see the growth of these projects to their maturity. So we've tailored lines of credit or multiple tools that allow us to engage with one product over different phases of their life cycle. So long-term engagement with tailored facilities that respond to community value would be my intervention, especially around financial innovation. Thank you.
Let me take a question that Priya Tiwari has raised, that how can a festival which happens only for maybe short period at one place attract tourism? Now, in 2010, the villages like that we work with, let's say I'll give an example, Patachitra village, Pingla, had no visitors. 2010, we first started the village festival. The 2010, I asked the local communities, what do you understand out of this fair? What is the benefit? Interestingly, they said, we understand that the neighbors also like painting. This Patachitra is actually a scroll based on natural colors. That's the heritage component. And because they used to go around neighbors showing the scroll, people used to think they are the beggars, whereas they had such a knowledge which you and me do not have. So then 2010, the first fair, the artists themselves said, now we understand even the locals appreciate the Patachitra. 2011, I asked the same question to the same gentleman and the group, and they said that even the locals started buying. 2012, interestingly, other than Calcutta or the neighborhood, Calcutta is the nearest big city, 2.5 hours from there. But interestingly, we saw Delhi, Mumbai, and other cities started coming in. 2012 onwards, it's an international destination. So the village fair has to be calendarized. That's a basic important thing. 3 days of festival doesn't mean the celebration stops there. No, it actually opens up. It passes the knowledge to the world that there is a village which has this. So whenever you go, then the community is there. Because there is no artificial, there is no stall, there is no stage. It is, the houses are the studios where one can really see the thing. Right now, we have 18 such village festivals, evolved one after one, and support and other things continue. And even during the pandemic period, the high pandemic period, just after that, between November 2020 and February 2021, about 150,000 plus visitors went to these 18 villages, and about 20 million of Indian rupees worth of sales happened from the villages by the artists themselves. So that's a village festival. Festival in a city, if it can be curated properly, then it actually, like Surjahan, it actually creates a platform for the rural talents to share the platform with the international artist. And there, even the reaching out to the elite audience of the city is very important for the rural artists. So that makes, so the acceptability, the knowledge passes on, and the young generation amongst the audience also gets to know about them, and then they also start appreciating their own heritage, even in the cities. So that's why it is extremely important to develop festivals, keeping the traditional artist in mind, but rather than them going for the other way, it is important that bring the world to them and let it be open to all. And that increases the pride and recognition and creates further opportunities to them, including excellent tourism.
네, 대표님 답변 감사드립니다. 근데 사실 방금 질문은
Thank you very much.
유튜브에 올라온
That was a response, I think, to one of the YouTube questions that we received from the channel. I was going to ask you that question. I was going to come back to that question later on, but I was also going to ask Dr. Amitava for the common question that I asked earlier, but maybe I would change the question around. So for safeguarding ICH and the preservation of ICH, festivals can also be a way to foster, encourage participation from individuals and communities and groups. As a social enterprise, you're already doing that very much. So what is the social enterprise role? What is the role of social enterprises in the safeguarding and preservation of ICH? And what is the advice that you would like to give to young generation who would like to participate in this?
아미타바 바타차리아 대표님.
Yeah, but,
Dr. Amitava.
What is the question? Because
공통 질문으로는
Yes, the common question to all of our panelists was that in transmitting ICH, there's groups and governments and individuals and communities that they should participate in this process, that UNESCO is encouraging them to participate.
Mr. Bhattacharya, can you hear me?
yeah, I can, but I'm sorry, I can't. I actually don't know Korean language, so if you can kindly tell it in English, I'll be very happy to reply.
Okay, I will give the question to the presenter first, and then I will give the question later. Okay?
Sure.
데이비드 웰런 대표님께 동일한 질문인데요.
Yes, I would like to ask the same question to Mr. David Wellen, but would you like to take on a technological approach? How can IT actually help, including virtual reality, of course? How can it help groups and individuals to protect ICH?
Yeah, so especially with World Heritage Sites, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, they can be digitally scanned and brought into virtual reality. And also as well with humanitarian efforts where you have a lot of displaced people who are sent to all different countries, you know, from there might be a war in their own country and they're all separated from their village. Communities like this can actually still keep in touch, not just on video, but also in a virtual setting where they can build their own virtual communities and walk around, and it's a deeper connection. Whereas again, if you're on video with large groups of people, people can overtalk each other very quickly. It's only the presenter or the person who's talking is engaged with the conversation, and quite often the only other engagement is in a text window on the right hand side of the screen. So I would definitely see that getting displaced people into these virtual communities and also photogrammetry of these historic sites before they're lost is something that we can help with today, and something that will definitely reap a lot of benefits in the future.
예, 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you very much. And moving on.
Dr. Jyoti, I would like to ask a similar question to you. So in 2003, UNESCO ratified the convention, but that was a long time ago. It was in 2003. So we've seen a lot of different changes across society since then. So given the current challenges and changes around our society right now, what can we do to try to encourage more participation from individuals and groups? What does UNESCO have to say about this?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. I think the key point remains that ICH practices, elements need to remain relevant for the local communities, and the local communities need to continue to feel the meaningfulness of these practices. They're not just forms to be followed, but they're actually, it's part of their identity. They transmit, continue to transmit. So sustainable development for the local communities remains central. So with this in mind, the UNESCO Sustainable Tourism Program has been developed for World Heritage, where it's important always to ensure that local communities are the main beneficiaries, who are also the main practitioners of the ICH in those places, and the local communities have a leading role in sustainable tourism management. So such a community-centered approach to tourism, rather than looking at revenue generation per se, is, I think, very fundamental, because it both engages, it values and respects local people, local communities, and engages them. And at the same time, their traditional knowledge becomes the key way that informs the activities, the way that the tourism, the place is experienced. It's experienced through their eyes, through their perspective, again, giving value to their way of thinking. And such an approach then results in strengthening systems for the transmission of this knowledge and these practices to future generations, because it continues to remain relevant, meaningful, and benefiting the local communities. I think the fundamental issue that often emerges is when development plans, projects, especially tourism efforts for mass tourism, are created in such a way that they come in conflict with the practices, beliefs of local communities, and no longer benefits them. So they find it more beneficial to abandon, the financially, or they're not so much, they find it beneficial as much as they are forced for various financial reasons to abandon their practices, even though they find them meaningful, to seek alternatives. And I think this is where it's really key to look at the values of sustainable tourism, and that's why the programs that we have developed look at ways in which the local communities can be very closely engaged and benefit and be the key beneficiaries of the projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Amitabh Bhattacharya,
Yeah.
due to the time limitation, I will move to next question. Is it okay? I will give the next question.
So should I answer now?
No, thank you.
Okay.
네, 유튜브로부터 받은 질문들을
So
드리겠습니다.
I am going to go straight to the questions that we received on YouTube. These are metaverses and various virtual connections that we're seeing because of COVID-19. Are there any case examples where we were able to virtually market and tell more people about ICH, or have there been any detrimental cases of that? What is the future that you would like to see coming up with maybe virtual marketing or campaign efforts for ICH? Who would like to respond to this question?
Yes, I can talk about this.
Okay, sure. Please.
Yes, well, I think that what we showed about the World Heritage Journeys, for instance, where there is more than 1,000 pages online, I think it's a very clear evidence that there's a huge, and this was even before, COVID-19 really hit, but, this has only increased, but the importance of digital. But I think the ability to be able to reach people through digital means is only expanding, and is very key. And it's also a way by which local people can share their stories, because the digital can become a means by which it's not necessarily, it's like who holds the camera and who's able to tell their stories. And the possibility of telling multiple stories from multiple perspectives, sharing local languages, and being able also to create interpretations, because you have the language possibility online. I mean, these are all things that I think are extremely important ways that digital technology can support local communities and help them to keep to transmit their practices. It becomes both an archive and a way of sharing. So that it depends on how it's set up, but it can play both of those roles. So I'll just stop there for the moment.
Thank you, Mr. David Whelan.
Yeah, we've had a series of events inside the Engage platform, because of COVID-19. We actually had a UN youth event inside Engage, where we had young people from all over the world inside communicating very naturally, and it is a very natural way to communicate, because on video, people control each other, whereas when they're in a virtual space and they feel like they're standing right next to the person, there's that kind of personal boundary and respect, and then they're hearing stories from other parts of the world. These could be kids, again, from war-torn countries, talking to Americans or Irish people about their culture and about their experiences in life, and it can be quite emotional and quite telling on the young people that are hearing this. But not only are they communicating in these virtual worlds, they're actually showing their communities or their locations using 360 video and representations as well. So it's not just telling somebody or showing somebody a picture, it's actually visiting these places in virtual reality, which really gives people, it really opens their eyes to other people's experiences and living through other people's eyes. That's, I think, one of the key benefits of this technology. It can be used for a great deal of good when used in the correct way.
Thank you.
We were talking about how in the post-COVID era, and also especially during COVID-19, we can use different methodologies to overcome these challenges. As George mentioned in his presentation, he stressed the importance of communities, but because of COVID-19, there could be some instances where the community spirit and different community rituals would become weakened. Mr. George, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you. I'm following the reflections of my fellow panelists. What is also clear is that, to me, digital capabilities come with their own limitations. And beyond the question of finance, digital capabilities come with structural limitations, including access, including, I can see my avatar speaking. It's very interesting. I don't know if anyone else can see that video. However, to continue my thoughts, structural limitations when it comes to digital capabilities must be considered, because they play at the issue of inclusion. So it is important, as we deepen the logic and the frameworks for cultural expression to be hosted on digital platforms, we must remember that a lot of people in the world cannot access these technologies. And those that can access, there is also asymmetries within those that can access. because there are issues around skill, there are issues around abilities and different abilities, there are issues around places where people have freedoms to access these tools, and there are places in the world that people do not have these freedoms. So culture heritage and this in this new era, even as we support and we encourage and we invest in the questions of adoption, we must consider the asymmetries. The other thing that I also want to highlight on the question of digital adoption of new media, say virtual environments. We sponsored an experiment recently, and what we found out is that even in environments where young people, maybe in colleges, in schools, who have the access and have the skills, they find that these digital environments are also limiting. I'll give you an example. We were trying to adopt a very common book literature into augmented reality. And when we commissioned young people to use augmented reality, we found that African gestures, African body sizes, African tools were not part of the play stores that were existing. We found that the dominant cultures that are behind the production of digital assets really do not have the breadth of understanding to create enough tools to capture different expressions across our peoples. So the first thing should be an investment alongside access, an investment in the ability for communities to produce their own gestures, produce their own tools, produce their own intonation, sounds, and all these things that allow people to exist in virtual environments, even before we allow this to be ubiquitous ways of transmitting cultural knowledge. So I support the idea that information age and web and deep web are with us, but we must systematically look at the barriers so that there can be a value-based engagement in this space. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, we've got more questions, but due to the time limitation, I cannot keep going. I will deeply appreciate you all of the presenters for giving us a wonderful presentation. It's time to wrap up. 오늘 참여해주신 또 유튜브를 통해서
I know that there are many people who are joining us online and through the metaverse as well. And I would also like to thank our 4 esteemed panelists, of course, and all of the organizers and the hosts of today's forum. I know that tomorrow is the 3rd day of the forum, and I'd like to ask you for your continued participation. Thank you very much.